There are a few figures as significant in American poetry of the 20th century as Theodore Roethke, a big, burly guy who just commanded the artistic and poetic world of mid-century America. He was born in Saginaw, Michigan. His father was a German immigrant, heritage which made things a little uncomfortable sometimes, a little self-conscious in the early 20th century for its association with the violence unfolding in Europe. His father ran a greenhouse with his uncle, and this gave Roethke an appreciation for plant life in general, but also he linked those images, the life cycles of early plant life, to the kind of sub-rational growth of human childhood. The fascination with this phenomena are woven through his individual feelings of guilt and loss connected with the loss of his father. His father died of cancer when Roethke was just 14 years old, and the connection that he has, the meaning that he finds in plant life as a kind of analog for human life is remarkable in his work. Roethke was clearly brilliant from a young age, although he didn't much like school. He graduated magna cum laude from the University of Michigan and continued on there for an MA, and even took some classes at Michigan Law School. And then he pursued higher level graduate work at Harvard, and even took a few classes at Harvard Law School, although that did not last very long. He went on to teach poetry at a variety of colleges and universities around the nation. He settled at the University of Washington in Seattle, and he became a kind of epicenter for poetic activity in the American Northwest, really shifting it away in a kind of dramatic way from the Brahmin-like East Coast empire of aestheticism. And for those last 15 years of his life, he attracted a remarkable number of great talents. Students of his include poets like James Wright, Carolyn Kaiser, and Richard Hugo. The poet David Wagoner, really significant writer in his own right, was a colleague of Roethke's at the University of Washington, who wrote a play about Roethke, and also helped edit and publish some of Roethke's poetry notebooks after Roethke's death. In all of this time, Roethke wrote continuously. He's not a super productive or prolific poet in terms of publishing, but he wrote continuously, filling more than 200 notebooks. One estimate, however, is that he only published roughly 3% of what he wrote. But each new publication drew more praise. He was recognized as a genius from the very beginning, from his very first publication, but each one started to amp up the popular recognition of this artist. So much so that in 1953, his book *The Waking* won a Pulitzer Prize, and the title poem of that is referenced in Kurt Vonnegut's super successful novel *Slaughterhouse-Five*. The writer James Dickey, a novelist of deliverance and a great poet in his own right, once called Roethke one of the greatest of all American poets, saying, "I don't see anyone else that has the kind of deep gut vitality that Roethke's got. Whitman was a great poet, but he's no competition for Roethke." That is high, high praise. And so this is a significant artist that we need to all be very much aware of. When you're reading him in Roethke, look for his use of both free verse and formal structures. He toggles back and forth between them with great facility, where sometimes his poems just seem like jottings, almost like they are lifted from a notebook and have no actual claim to be poetry. But through the arrangement of the words and the lines, they speak a much more natural, inchoate language than more formal verse can. But at the same time, he also deals with very formal structures, the very formal rhyme schemes and meters and conventional genres of poetry in a way that is very fresh and very vital in its own way, and creates a kind of significance within those structures that the free verse doesn't really have that gear. So he can work in both ways, which is really unique among poets who usually sort of attract to one way or the other. Obviously, also nature imagery. He was a great walker among the open fields of Michigan as a boy, and of course, the greenhouse experiences really kept him very involved in that, and the tactile sensibility of plant life, of a kind of non-rational life beyond human, that could be a kind of recognizable symbol for life generally. That's very really important in Rothke's work. Of course, throughout all of this, he is dealing very much with existential themes, grand ideas of the universe, as he posits himself as a kind of eye staring around at the world around him that does not always make a lot of sense, but he is trying to figure it out as he's trying to figure out himself. And of course, within this, you see self-reference. He is a very much self-involved writer in a non-egotistical sense, I guess, or in at least not the common definition of egotistical. And you can see him bringing that self-reference, bringing that point of view in the world as he's trying to figure it out from a centralized location, as his way of working through his own trauma. He did have some significant mental issues, mental health issues, anxiety issues, some depression issues, very common in 20th century poets and poets in general. And his work is often how he is processing the various concerns and traumas of life and offering it out to the world as a way to deal similarly with it as they can. Now, Rothke's verse in doing so marks a very clear break with the modernist ethos of impersonality, as in the work of T.S. Eliot. Rothke is deeply personal and always, to an almost uncomfortable degree of intimacy. He probes the deepest thoughts and feelings within himself, but not even just himself so much as himself as a representative of the inner self of all humanity. The images he saw in the outside world became analogs and resonances for the psychological and spiritual interior. This led the way for more primal immediacy in 20th century poetry and art generally that was more accessible, less abstract, and more enjoyable on a variety of levels. Rothke is a great artist, and he is remarkably accessible, remarkably approachable. You can open up a book of Rothke and just start taking it in, and it can speak to you. You don't need a lot of footnotes with Rothke. You don't need a lot of expertise in the traditions of poetry that comes before it. He is dealing with a lot of that stuff, and you can find significant little details and context that help you understand some of the interpretations, some of the meaning packed in there. But on a surface level, he starts off by inviting you in, because it is primarily a human project that he is dealing with there. It is primarily about understanding the inside of humanity, and that is something that we all have. And so Rothke is a brilliant artist for the 20th century, a brilliant artist for any century, and knowing him is crucial to understanding an awful lot of the poetry and art of the 20th century broadly.